Hi, I have totally missed my video yesterday. My room is a complete mess, but I did want to take time to talk with Sad Boy here. He had some interesting PvP RuneScape things he wanted to, and I figured it'd be nice to do a video along with him. So let's start with you obviously have an interest in RuneScape PvP. What's your history with RuneScape?
I've played it for like a very long time right now, since like properly since 2011, 2012. So I was
Mm-hmm.
there. I was there before the ELC was released,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a different opinion to a lot of what gets put out there, like how Jagex ruined the game and what should be
Mm-hmm.
done, what shouldn't be done, because a lot of things are just essentially it's just victim blaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because no one ever talks about the fact that Jagex spent that 2011 to 2012 cracking down on bots, and that
Mm-hmm.
obviously had a negative impact on the player numbers. So
Mm-hmm.
if you just go into a world and there's now like 100,000 less players, right? It was peaking at around 300k, and then after the
Mm-hmm.
bot nuke and the bot watch, two bot updates within that same span, same 1 year span, it went all the way down. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to start hating Jagex, that's the perfect way. It's like, oh well, look, player numbers are down. That means the game's getting
Mm-hmm.
bad, and then that obviously led into evolution combat, and then in my opinion, it spiraled out of control, because I don't believe
Mm-hmm.
a developer would ever want to create a bad product, and I think the community reacted very emotionally
Mm-hmm.
and didn't let Jagex fix it. And because of that, we have this kind of like divide between the OSRS community and the RuneScape free community, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and then now both communities are fighting each other. So it's like we can't even help each other. So it's really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Yeah, because you remember with the old tick system where I know we were talking about this, where EXP works completely different than it used to, where you had you hit the cow in Lumbridge till you were level 20 or 30, like me,
yeah,
and every time you did damage, it was 4 experience points. They completely overhauled just the EXP system alone, which you did mention EOC. It's fundamentally just a different game. Would you agree with that?
it's the combat is fundamentally different, yes, but
Okay.
the way the game fundamentally works is the same between both games. So you still have your
Mm-hmm.
skilling, you still have your questing, you still have your mini games, you still have the tick based I guess architecture at this point that still functions
Mm-hmm.
the same in similar situations. You have buses like Raksha that can be ported over to OSRS.
Mm-hmm.
It's very familiar with that architecture, so it can work. So the games are very similar, but there have been changes made overall to change the fundamental feel of the game,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't mind, because I think this is like the natural progression. Because take OSRS for example, right? They For them to release new rewards, they have to make sure that it's balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's balanced, it means that you can't get insane power creep. Not power creep, but you can't make the game more difficult
Mm-hmm.
whilst not all rewarding the players for that. So a good example would be next in RuneScape 3 when it was released, it gave
Mm-hmm.
access to the new sets, right? 12 of Virtus
Mm-hmm.
Pernix. That is a direct upgrade from the Bandos and Barrel sets. But in
Mm-hmm.
OSRS, what they did is that they nerfed a bunch of gear, and then they are now selling you a better new gear, which effectively takes up the position of that old gear. Because they went through this
Mm-hmm.
last year, and they do that because they don't want to hit power creep, because then
Mm-hmm.
players will lose value of their weapons, and they want to maintain that value. And you can't do that because every now and then you need to have a direct tier upgrade. And I think OSRS has learned that the hard way by going through this um, adverse way of being like, okay, we don't want power creep in the game, but then inevitably it's going to happen, and you can't do anything about that. It's going to happen not just for the combat; it's going to happen for skilling. It's going to happen for everything else, because what reward will you be given to a new player other than an XP reward or something that indirectly gives XP? So
Mm-hmm.
you have to power creep is a natural part of the game, and I think the word it shouldn't be power creep, but more so power cliffing. The idea that as the story progresses, everyone gets stronger. That's a narrative
Mm-hmm.
term. So, like, take Dragon Ball for example. As we go on from like
Mm-hmm.
Frieza Saga to Cell Saga to much all the side characters like Piccolo and Krillin, they will also get stronger, and that's
Mm-hmm.
presumed, right? And that's sort of like what's going on with RuneScape over a long period of time. So as the game progresses, it should be expected that the game naturally gives more weapons and items. But then that causes a lot of issues as well, and it's really hard to figure out overall. And that,
Hmm.
yeah, and that's just like a tangent I just went off of.
No, I think it's definitely helpful for the point at hand, though. I 100% think you're onto something. I'm not super familiar with Dragon Ball. I just haven't watched it. It hasn't been in my repertoire. But I mean, I've watched Naruto Shippuden,
Yeah,
which I've gone over how you have three different,
yeah,
three or four different series in it. Yeah, while it is a narrative term, it definitely has a place here because that's what's going on. You are interacting with this power creep, power cliffing, so to speak, in certain situations. And as you continue, old content is just going to naturally fade out. I mean, it's the concept of rotation in a trading card game, right?
yeah,
You have base set, sorry, core set. You have expansion 1, 2. Expansion 3 is going to be the most powerful generally of the set. It's just the natural progression of games, which you did touch on. It's that the designers and developers need to be cognizant of that fact. Um, so I mean, you're definitely bringing up good points, and this definitely does feed into the PvP argument that I know you're bringing up. So I think that was a necessary preface to the situation.
yeah. And also, I stopped playing. I kind of like took a break from RuneScape after like 2016. There was a
Uh huh.
Yeah, and instead of playing RuneScape, I played League of Legends, and I felt the
Hmm.
esports scene, and then I eventually went to Yu-Gi-Oh and other trading card games. And I just observed how these trading card games or esport titles work, and I understood PvP at a fundamental level. It seems to me that a
Hmm.
lot of people, when discussing PvP, they view a lot of people in RuneScape when they're discussing PvP, they view it with the perspective of it being inside of RuneScape, the little bubble that they are in, instead of looking
Hmm.
outwards to seeing what can we borrow and what can we do to help make the game better. Because ultimately, you want the
Hmm.
game to get better, and you don't want it to get better in the same way these fresh start servers are coming out. That's a separate topic, but like you get the point. Like you want to make the game better, but you need to do it the right way,
Hmm.
and that's what.
Correct. And I mean, and to, I guess, contrast the point, because this is an important point to note for a lot of people, because they do think, well, just design it in this way, it'll be a perfect game. There will never be a perfect system.
Yes,
If you go into something, game balance in itself is just a very hard thing to even attempt to achieve, especially with the amount of players RuneScape has. There will never be a perfect system, and it just, you have to just be cognizant of that. Which, just wanted to mention that really fast, is we're not saying it needs to be a perfect system.
yeah,
That the design and the balance as it currently sits is fundamentally flawed at a core level. So that's a little bit what you're trying to get across, is how do we fix this with what we currently have.
it's not what it is what we currently have. But like, what's like a good foundation? That's essentially what I'm trying to bring up here. It's like what would be
Hmm.
a solid foundation that even if the game was to go tits up, it would
Hmm.
still work. Like, what would that
Hmm.
be? What would that look like? And I think we can just look at every other esport and see, oh, well, this is how they do it, and it's worked for so many years. It's been proven, it's been tested, and why
Hmm.
can't we just bring that over? And we need to bring that over correctly. This is something that old school did with the dual arena rework, right? Now
Hmm.
I'm not that familiar with it, but apparently it wasn't as successful as it initially was because players still the high end PvP players still go and PvP in the wilderness. So
Hmm.
it kind of did fail in a way in attracting PvP into the community. But
And I think to interject really fast, there is a key difference between PvP and PK, because a
yeah,
lot of people will lump these two into the same
yeah,
category.
yes, they're both different.
These, while they're inherently tied together because of how it's done, PKing and PvP are not the same thing. As someone who's been subject to a couple scams and lost a lot of money in RuneScape, and it's
Yeah,
demoralizing.
yeah,
These are not the same thing. People that PK don't necessarily want to PvP. People that want to PvP don't necessarily want to PK. So, important distinction there to
yeah.
interject.
Yes, one of the when you go on Reddit or any social media site where they discuss this, right? They
Hmm.
always look at the rewards first. How do we get players to play this content? Well, what you're doing there is that you're forcing players who don't want to be PvP into PvP,
Oh, yep.
which that then exaggerates the problem because now players who don't like PvP will already have a bad understanding of what PvP is and where it fits into the game. Not only that, but one more important thing is that PvP isn't. inherently competitive, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
means it's inherently toxic. But it's toxic in the case that it's PvP and it's competitive and people want to win. It's not toxic in the sense that all PvP equals toxicity.
Yes.
Yes, it's just a high level competition, and people want. You see this in sports, right? Athletes get really competitive.
Yeah.
It's not just exclusive to like gaming. PvP is like inherently competitive, and we need to accept that when designing a PvP system.
And it's okay to be competitive 100%. And I mean, it's okay also for it's 100% okay for something to have that competitive to have that friction. What needs to be addressed is when it turns into like hate speech and toxicity. That's specifically what people have an issue with,
Yeah,
not necessarily that the game's competitive.
yeah, that's always going to be a problem, and you can easily deal with that. Just mute the player, right? Just time them out for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what League does. That's what well, I don't know. I'm not familiar with other esports to the same level as I am with League, but you have voice chat.
Mhm.
You can mute him. There's always a way out, but people will always be competitive. They'll be toxic. They won't. You have players that want to learn the game, and you have players who don't want
Mm.
to learn the game. And this is a bigger issue. And I probably won't be able to explain this entire thing because I went into the RS guy's channel the other day or a week ago now, and
Mhm.
I said hot take. You're always going to have a problem teaching Americans how to play a video game because Americans are inherently lazy. And he immediately like banned me for that. And I never
Well,
got.
as
I know.
one, I can confirm.
Yes. Okay. And then I tried to like defend myself. I'm like, in every major esport, the best players are not Americans, and we can view the culture of that esport to determine why is that happening because it's a larger cultural issue here. If we look
Mm.
at, I'm going to link you something right now. I'm just going,
Okay.
oh, PGG, let's see. So I'm going to link you a stats of League of Legends ranked player base,
Mhm.
and this is a, let's see, there is okay. Okay, these are the ranked player base breakdown where every player ends
Mhm.
up going. So you might need to click on one of the little tab icons. It's under game stats by tier. So it is,
Mhm.
and if you look at the breakdown, the majority of players in League of Legends who play ranked or the competitive game mode are anywhere ranked between bronze and silver, and this makes up over
Mhm.
50% of the player base. So the majority of the player base fundamentally don't understand the game.
Mhm.
Isn't that similar to RuneScape?
I would say so. Yeah. It boggles me because I assume everyone in RuneScape does have access to the Igneous Calzuck, and I'm like, oh, I'm clearly behind. I've only been on Steam alone playing for about 900 hours,
Yeah,
right? So I assume everyone else has it. But then I remember that apparently I'm somehow in the 30% or
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
minority that can boss, which just kind of throws me for a loop.
Yes, the majority, and the reason I brought this into a laziness, right, is
Hmm.
are you on the website?
Yes, I did pull it up.
You can see server, right? You see the pie chart,
Hmm.
and there's KR, JP, NA, EU West.
Yeah, North America makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
America's 34% silver specifically.
yeah, okay,
Japan, a lot of concentration in silver.
okay. The because these are just a stat breakdown within the given server. It doesn't necessarily mean that much because it just means okay, this is a distribution of players. What is interesting is that when you look at if you follow League of Legends, when a
Hmm.
Korean player plays, when you have a Korean player, let's say they're
Hmm.
gold in their native region and they go over to NA, they will immediately
Hmm.
shoot up like 2 ranks to platinum, to diamond, maybe even challenger. It's insane.
Hmm.
And this is a cultural gap between the West and the East. The East's view on gaming is more that if you're gonna waste your time doing anything, then you may as well be good at
Hmm.
it, good at it, and strive for excellence. Whereas the West's viewpoint is more on that gaming as a pastime, as a hobby, something you want to do for fun. So when you look in the cultural aspect on why teaching players is difficult, you have to add this into the equation because
Hmm.
RuneScape is predominantly North American Europe split, and Europe falls
Hmm.
in between that divide that I just said with the east and west. It's somewhere in the middle. So the
Yeah.
European players are more likely to go to the extremes to learn something, whilst the American players are not likely to do that.
Mhm.
And again, I use League of Legends as an example because it is the only esport that is truly international and the closest thing we have to like the World Cup in soccer. It is the
Mhm.
only thing. So we can use a lot of the statistics from here. And this isn't just the casual side of things. This also affects pro play in League of Legends as well. We see the same trends. It's it's a cultural divide. And
Mhm.
how are you going to design a system to teach players uh, this teach players who come from vastly different cultures and who have vastly different understandings on gaming and what they are willing to
Mhm.
do? It's an impossible task because ultimately it comes down to how do you teach someone how to learn something?
You ultimately can't.
Yeah,
As someone with teacher friends, as someone who is not a teacher by trade, as someone who likes to teach things that I do know to people. I mean, I've taught 70-year-old people in my line of work how to access their phone. I've told them how this is how you open new tabs. If there's that willingness and intent to learn, that
yes,
desire to learn, it's possible. If it's not there to begin with, if you do view it as, oh, I'm just going to hop on and I'm going to go play Ari for an hour, which I do.
yeah,
I'm not good at it. I don't. I'm not. I'm not good at the game. And you're not really intent to take it to say a master grandmaster level. I mean, you can be the best teacher in the world with all the qualifications. If that
yeah.
desire to learn and improve
If
isn't there, you're
yeah,
stuck.
if the student doesn't want to learn, they will not learn, no matter what the resources you give them.
Mhm.
And that's like the core issue here because that's the core issue with teaching players about the game. And what I am suggesting is that we take a, let's say, an MMR system or a matchmaking system, and we add that into the game because that will match players against each other who are relative to the same skill level. It will limit the variables that they have to play with, and because of that, you will learn a lot better. They will learn a lot more. This is exactly how players learn in League of Legends, right?
Mhm.
When I talk to my friends who they were stuck in silver for so long, and then they started
Mhm.
one trick in one particular champion, and then they got out of silver, they got to gold.
Mhm.
It's no coincidence that happened because what you're doing there is you're limiting the variables. So the only thing I have to worry about is my one champion that I will play every single time.
Mhm.
So learning the champion becomes like the first thing, and then after that you slowly learn the game outwards. You slowly add in more complexity outwards, and that's what a good PvP system would do. Right, that's what matchmaking and MMR. That's what he does. It teaches players
Mhm.
with relatively the same skill level as each other, and
Mhm.
helps them learn, aids in their learning because the players who want to get better and who want to compete will will climb that system.
Mhm.